Every year, Kenya faces more than 200 billion shillings deficit in infrastructure funding, dragging economic social development. The funding gap has impacted negatively on development of key projects in roads, water, health, aviation, among others. The African Development Bank says it has so far identified various projects to be funded by the bank to the tune of 310 billion shillings.
Whereas we have made commendable strides in accelerating infrastructure development in Kenya, more remains to be done. The political will to take us to the next level certainly exists. This is true, not only here in Kenya, but in many African nations represented here this morning. But the challenge remains. Public funding is limited and there are competing priorities. And one answer to that challenge ought to be perfectly clear to all of us. The private sector must step up and help us close the infrastructure gap on the African continent.
Speaking during the Africa 50 shareholder meeting, the African Development Bank Chair Akinwumi Adesina noted that the bank is in talks with Kenyan authorities to identify more projects under the Big Four agenda for further funding.
Africa 50's project development company is dedicated to helping to accelerate the development of bankable projects. Africa 50's project finance company is dedicated to deploying innovative financing, debt and equity instruments to finance infrastructure needs on the continent. With a new, fully private sector window expected to be launched soon, Africa 50 will be able to offer very attractive market rates of return to private investors, especially institutional investors.
So far, the bank is financing the construction of the Outer Ring Road, the second runway, and the development of a 300 high-voltage power line to Western Kenya. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich says Kenya will double its contribution to Africa 50 to $100 million in an effort to create more funds towards development.
We are looking at funding for transmission line under a PPP arrangement, where we will be discussing with the Electricity Regulation Commission, where they will provide a wheeling tariff so that it will provide for investments in transmission lines. So that has already been identified. We are going to have further discussion with the Africa 50 to see how they can participate in that project.
The Africa 50 is an initiative of the African Development Bank aimed at pooling resources towards developing various projects in AFDB member states.